Hey guys, how's it going? Istanbul. We're gonna see if we can get through this. This is one of the loudest, if not the loudest city in the entire world that I've ever been to. So I tried picking a time that hopefully you'd be able to hear me. This place right here has been under construction all month, and they just took a break, so I don't know, we're going to try to get through this, but this is one of those unfiltered conversations, just going to walk you through kind of a bunch of my thoughts on Istanbul, some of the cultural differences that I've noticed, some things that I've liked, haven't liked. I know a lot of people associate Istanbul with like scams, so I'm going to touch on that and just, my overall thoughts. So, it's a fascinating place, Istanbul is. It's in Turkey as a whole. We'll start with the scams. If you look up online what to expect when coming to Istanbul, there are a lot of people who I guess have had experiences being scammed, a lot of horror stories there. I personally haven't experienced any of that. It's not something that I'd be too worried about coming here. I've had quite the opposite experience. I found that the Turkish people have been very warm and welcoming, just very kind people overall. And I think obviously there's a lot of tourism here in Istanbul, and anywhere that you go where there's a lot of tourism, there are also going to be people looking to take advantage of tourists. So I'm not saying that that doesn't exist here, but it doesn't seem to be happening at any higher rate compared to other places in Europe or anywhere else that I've traveled. And I know a lot of people talk about it with like the taxis. Yes, it's a little bit different here because, it's a regular taxi meter, really no different, but like you don't have as many options. Like if you call an Uber here, you're not really calling an Uber, you're calling a taxi. The taxi will show up and it will be tracked through Uber. The payment might go through Uber, but ultimately there's still like a meter running. But that kind of protects you in a way, like as a tourist, because when you open up the Uber app, it's not going to give you a set price. It's going to say, hey, it's going to be between 800 lira and 1,000 lira, or whatever the rate is going to be. It's going to give you a range, and I have never had a taxi driver go outside of that range by the end of the trip. So yes, the meter will be running, but I've never been shocked. There's never been that feeling of being scammed on my end. But that's not to say that it doesn't happen. Certainly be on the lookout anywhere, but I really don't think that's a big issue here in my experience in Istanbul. Culturally, this is one of like the richest cultures that I've ever gotten to be a part of. It is just, it's fascinating. I mean, it is a beautiful, beautiful, just really interesting culture in so many ways. So I'll touch on just a couple. One, it's a fascinating city because you've got multiple cultures because of like the geographic location of it. If you didn't know, Istanbul is on two continents, right? I right now am on the European side, but the Bosphorus Strait is like right over somewhere back there. And if you cross that, which like the ferry takes like 15, 20 minutes to get across, you're actually on the Asia continent. And the neighborhoods are all so drastically different here. Just on the European side, there's a lot of differences depending where you are. And then you hop over the Asian side and you very much feel that you are in Asia. There's a lot of similarities because it's still Turkey, still the Turkish culture, but it is a different pocket of the Turkish culture. So a lot of cities you're going to have kind of one main culture throughout. This is not one of those places, and that's part of what makes it so special is like you just never know what you're going to get. It's one of the best cities in the world to just kind of wander through because every neighborhood is going to be different. There's going to be a different feel, slightly different architecture, things to look at, and it's just, I don't know, it's pretty spectacular. The cuisine is phenomenal. I really enjoy so much of just that constant like new action in Istanbul. So I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's got to just make this one of the coolest cities in the world. But culturally, there are other differences that are really unique to see. You can hear things getting a little bit louder. One of the most interesting things is like the smoking culture. It seems that, as an American, you always have this idea in your head that, when you go to Europe, people are going to be smoking more. And as a whole, yes, that's true. But in Western Europe, you don't see as much smoking as you would expect. And I think the rates have probably go down. Somebody will probably fact check me on that, so let me know if I'm wrong. But Istanbul and Turkey as a whole, that doesn't seem to be the case at all. Like, it seems like everybody smokes, and that is a bit of culture shock. Just because it's different. It really does feel like you're entering a whole new world in that sense. I find that Western Europe feels very in some ways comfortable, but all just kind of like the same. Like the cultures move within one another. They all kind of change at similar rates. So there's in general, there's not going to be a huge culture shock anywhere in Western Europe, where Turkey and Istanbul in particular, that's not necessarily the case, and it's one of those things that makes this really cool. But yeah, it's interesting seeing as many young people smoke as you do here, because it is everywhere. But beyond that, like, another big cultural difference is the animals, which is, it's just one of the coolest cultures for this aspect. You might have heard of like Istanbul, which is, a lot of people on Instagram will post pictures of the cats, because cats are everywhere here. And dogs and all kinds of animals. But what's really unique is here, yes, some people have pets, but there are just stray cats and dogs everywhere. But it's not like in the US or other parts of the world where a stray dog or cat is just a stray dog or cat. It's more feels like it's a community animal, and everybody does their part in like taking care of the animals. There's the honking. We'll get there in a second. There's some interesting things there. But everywhere you go, you'll see like these little houses that people have built for the cats. There's cat and dog food everywhere on the streets, put out fresh like multiple times, a day. Pretty much any store that you like walk down, you're gonna see big bags of cat and dog food that you can buy and leave it out for the animals. And the animals are just so accustomed to hanging out with the people. There's more honking. With the people. And it's just a completely different culture. Like, it is completely normal to be in any sort of restaurant, whether it's a hole-in-the-wall kind of place or, a somewhat nice restaurant. Cats are going to be walking through. That's going to be normal. If you're sitting at a cafe, cats will jump up on you, sit there on your lap while you're working on a laptop. They're just everywhere, and they're really comfortable around people. Don't take it the wrong way in that, like, they're not going to bother you. They're not going to, try to jump on you if you don't want to be, but most people here are just, they're very friendly with the animals, and I certainly am too. I really enjoy it, and the animals aren't shy like it. There really is just a special connection here between the community and the animals that live within the community that is just a really different and beautiful thing to get to be a part of. And I don't know, it's one of the most just interesting and fun things, about Istanbul. And you'll see old cats and like a ton of like baby kittens too, like everything. Like, there's just so much. I think in one of my first videos that I'd done about like Istanbul, I had mentioned like Ali's cat shelter, which is basically this guy who is retired, and he's over kind of in this neighborhood that I'm staying in, and he's built this little like almost like hotel looking thing for cats, and he just takes donations from people, and he takes care of all of these cats, and it is just the cutest thing. Like, this is just a happy old man who he's found what he loves in life, and it's hanging with the animals and taking care of them. So you'll see so many different variations of that in Istanbul, which is really beautiful and speaks to the culture and how kind the people are, not just to other people but to the animals. Another thing that is really interesting with that, which I think I also mentioned in that first tips video, is because there's so much cat food everywhere, the dogs, they don't moderate how much they eat as well as cats do. So the dogs are like, they're massive here. And it can be sad at times, and they're very like docile because I think they're just like full constantly, but it's an interesting thing. But yeah, expect to see, food, on the ground for the animals, and they will all, partake. So that's all, really interesting. And there's so many just cultural differences here. Another one is, compared to other places in the world, you see groups of men hanging out in ways that you don't see in other parts of the world. I'm trying to think of like a way to explain it. I don't know if it can be explained other than like you will see groups of like 8 to 10 men just hanging out, whether it's high schoolers, whether it's folks in their 20s and 30s, whether it's elderly folks. Like, there very much seems to be a focus culturally on maintaining friendships, and you'll see those groups of people being together, and you don't see that all the time in other cultures, especially like in the US. So, like, I think if you go to a US park, if you were to see like a group of 60-year-old men sitting together, you'd be like, oh, that's interesting, like, what's going on there? That's not the case here. Like, it's just everywhere, and everybody just seems to be really friendly, and it's just a very community-oriented culture, which again is just it's very unique, very interesting to get to see these little glimpses of and kind of experience for these short periods of time. But we'll talk about the honking. Might as well do this now. So I mentioned, like, this is one of the loudest places, in the entire world. And there's a few things, with that. One, the streets, which I know the camera's doing an awful job with the exposure. Behind me is, like, the Hagia Sophia and Galata Tower, and it's all beautiful. But these streets are really, really narrow. I'm doing a bad job showing it. But basically, traffic gets backed up really, really quickly here. Now, it's okay because they have wonderful public transportation, but for the cars that are going up and down these streets, they're like traffic jams constantly, and people are not shy about using their horns. Like, you think New Yorkers use their horns a lot? No, it's like here, it almost just feels like if you're in a car, if you're driving, and you're not honking every 15 seconds, you're doing something wrong. It really can feel like that at times. So I think that gets, some people with some culture shock, is like, it is just a noisy place on top of, all of the other noises. You've got animals, you hear cat fights, all the time. You hear the boats, out on the water. It's not happening right now, but obviously this is, a Muslim culture, so there's a lot of, prayer time that happens. I'll try to turn and show you. That little tower right here, those things are all over the place, and I think it's 5 times a day. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 5 times a day is prayer time, where somebody will, be in that little, at the bottom of that tower projecting, prayer, which is, done in the form of song, and that blasts through the neighborhoods, and there are multiple towers, all over the place. So anywhere you are in the city, you're going to hear that when that takes place, and it's just a lively culture with a lot of noise. This is not one of those like peaceful European cities as you might find in others. It's beautiful. It's wonderful, well worth a visit. But peaceful is maybe not the one that I'd use. Vibrant and energetic and alive are maybe some of the words that I'd use there. So yeah, you got to be ready for that, and it's just again an interesting interesting thing culturally. And the other piece is like the differences between neighborhoods and how the culture shifts between them. I already mentioned crossing continents, but I'm in this neighborhood called Cihangir, and it's kind of really artsy. It's got a pretty young crowd, but just like you walk 10 minutes in any direction and you're just completely different area, completely different feel, completely different groups of people, which is just, I don't know, it's fun. The non-uniformity is refreshing at times. I've really enjoyed all of that. I've got some other notes on cultural things I thought were interesting, so I want to go over these. Yeah. So let's talk about the hills. This is also a very hilly city, which a lot of people aren't necessarily prepared for. And I don't really know what there is to say about that other than that there's a lot of hills and the food is so good. And it's not the healthiest cuisine ever. It's not like particularly unhealthy, but there is a lot of oil that seems to be used in a lot of the cuisine, and it is really tasty. It's a place that I feel like if there weren't this many hills, I'd probably be feeling like, oh, I'm probably putting on a little bit of weight spending a month here, but that's not really how I end up feeling. But the hills are real. That's all I'll say, about that. Speaking of like the cuisine, a really interesting, cuisine as well, because again, you're gonna have different pockets like everywhere, but really good street food, right? One of my favorites is a dish called balik durum, which I guess is a relatively new dish. I think when I looked it up, it was like kind of gained popularity over the last 10-ish years, I want to say it was, and it's basically like a fish wrap. So on the Bosphorus Strait, the body of water that separates the two sides of Istanbul, lot of fish that are getting caught, and it's beautiful. Like if you're hanging out near the bridges, you'll just see like tons of fishermen just fishing all day long, and I'm sure they eat some of them themselves, sell to the restaurants. I mean, there's no shortage of fish here, but balik durum is this wonderful fish wrap that in some of the like hot spots in town over in like Karakoy, There are waits that are 30, 40, sometimes an hour, long to get these little wraps, and they're, wonderful. And then there's, a fish sandwich type of version. Obviously, you have all the kebabs. The kebabs are just, wonderful, whether it's chicken or lamb or just mincemeat. I mean, all kinds of different meat, and it's all really, really, tasty. The Turkish breakfasts are such an experience. It's not like one dish. It's almost like, here's a little bit of bread, here's some, vegetables, and then here are just like a bunch of different things to like dip. So there's gonna be like olives, you're gonna have some form of like, I don't know, like a peanut butter type thing, some olive oil, some, cucumber, tomato, like just everything that you can think of, like just this huge spread. And those are really, fun to take part in, and are pretty filling. Or you can have just kind of like the casual street food type of breakfast, which is a simit here. The biggest comparison, I guess, like to U.S. standards would be kind of like a bagel. It's like a bagel, a little bit thinner, a lot of sesame seeds on it, and they're really good. There's just so many different types of cuisines that are local here that are all just, it is not a city that you're going to come to and leave hungry. It is spectacular in that way, and one of my favorite cities in the world to eat in. I do want to talk about, though, one of the challenges, I think, for the locals. One of the things that seems to have changed quite a bit since the last time that I was here is inflation. And I know for any American person out there, I know, we've seen, some inflation, rise quite a bit, over the last few years, but not to this extreme. In the year that has gone by since the last time I was here, it seems like prices have pretty much doubled, gotten close to doubling in a lot of ways. It's happened with accommodation, certainly with food, and just kind of everything, all over the place. Things are just more expensive. Even some of the tourist attractions, like some things used to be free that are no longer free. Some of the things that were very low cost are now just kind of big money to get into. And that's just, I don't know, it's one of the things that I feel very fortunate. Obviously, being on the U.S. dollar helps me tremendously when traveling around the world, but getting to see how other people handle and are influenced and impacted by the same types of things that impact us back in the States and around the world is always really interesting. And I'd be lying if I said that I didn't think that the inflation has had a pretty big impact on the community here. Things still seem to be open. It doesn't seem like it's hit like a crippling point, at least in this area, but you can definitely see that folks are tighter on cash than they once were. So I realize my camera's about to die, so we'll see how much longer I can go on with this. But I guess I'll wrap up there before prayer time starts here in the next 5 minutes with this. Just really is one of those places that I think is misunderstood a lot, and that a lot of people don't have a desire to see for one reason or another, and that shouldn't be your perspective. I would recommend that everybody comes to Istanbul at least once in their life. It is one of the most special cities in the entire world. For me, I think right now it probably ranks top 3 for me. There's a reason I'm back here a second time, and I definitely want to come back a third time. And this has just been about Istanbul, right? There's so much other wonderful stuff throughout Turkey that we got a little bit of exposure to in this trip, with hot air ballooning, horseback riding, just all kinds of wonderful things. So definitely don't make the mistake of thinking that Istanbul and Turkey should be missed. It really is a special place, and definitely get to know the people because they have a really unique way of living that in a lot of ways is just very beautiful. So I'm sad to be going, but I've always appreciated my time, and would love to hear your thoughts. If you've been to Istanbul or Turkey, let me know what your experiences were down in the comment section, and let me know what you want to learn more about with these types of videos when I make them in the future. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys next time.